Good morning. Today, literally hundreds of workers from across Canada are on Parliament Hill with a very clear message for parliamentarians. Put people first. Families are continuing to struggle with the affordability crisis, and corporate greed is not only driving the affordability crisis, but it's also benefiting from it. Big corporations continue to hike prices on essentials like groceries while boosting their profits and enriching those at the very top. Corporate profits have absolutely worsened the affordability crisis, pushing workers to the edge. Wages are not keeping up with the skyrocketing cost of housing, of food, and other basic needs. Since March of last year, the Bank of Canada has hiked interest rates 10 times, reaching 5%, a level not seen in over 2 decades. Inflation has slowed, but the Bank of Canada does not deserve that credit. Grocery prices continue to be up over 20% since 2021, with staples like cooking oil and pasta and frozen vegetables rising even higher. Rate hikes have failed to address the real cause of inflation: supply chain disruptions, the war in Ukraine, natural disasters like the BC floods in 2022. They did nothing to curb corporate profiteering, which worsened inflation, leaving far too many families behind. Housing costs are also continuing to climb, 17% higher for mortgages and 8% higher for rents. Affordable housing is a challenge absolutely everywhere in this country, whether you're in a big city, in a small community, in rural areas, or in Canada's north. Home ownership is out of reach for so many, and workers really need deep housing affordability. In Canada, more than 1.5 million people are in core housing need. That means they're living in inadequate or not affordable or not suitable housing right now. Housing is a right, and everyone in Canada deserves the right to have a safe and affordable place to live. Another very pressing issue for us that we will be speaking to parliamentarians about is the issue of public health care services. Workers need strong, accessible, universal public health care where and when they need it. Care that's based on need, not on the ability to pay or on whether or not you happen to have workplace benefits. But we've seen decades of government underinvestment have weakened public health care, leaving it vulnerable even before the pandemic hit us. The pandemic absolutely strained our healthcare system, and some provincial governments also exploited that to expand more costly for-profit care. And let us be clear, for-profit healthcare doesn't actually solve the healthcare crisis. It just shifts workers out of the public system into a private system. Austerity and privatization are an absolute threat to education, to health and public services, but solidarity for workers is growing as workers across the country are gathering here today to demand better. Lily?
Thank you, Bea. Good morning, everyone. I'm Lily Chang, Secretary-Treasurer for the Canadian Labour Congress. Every day I hear from workers across Canada on the urgent need for significant investments in our workforce, starting from reforms to employment insurance and removing barriers to unionization. These steps are not just about fairness. They're about creating a more resilient and equitable economy where every worker has a chance to thrive. Employment insurance is a lifeline for workers experiencing job loss or seeking income support. Sadly, far too many Canadians, this lifeline is out of reach. Consider this: only 2 in 5 unemployed workers in Canada qualify for EI benefits. And for those who do qualify, the benefits are simply inadequate. At best, EI provides 55% of your average weekly earnings, with a maximum of only $668 a week. So let's ask ourselves, how can anyone live on that in this economy? The federal government has acknowledged the need for change, and now is the time to deliver. Canada's unions are calling on the government to create reforms that will make EI accessible and fair. Now, let's talk about unions, because they are the most effective tool we have to ensure fair wages, workplace protections, and economic security for workers. Yet despite these benefits, too many workers face barriers to joining a union. So this is what governments can do. First, promote unions as a social good. Second, support participatory standard setting in low-wage, high-precarity sectors. Third, guarantee basic protections such as a minimum of 10 paid sick days for all workers in every province and territory. And fourth, strengthen union security by passing Bill C-330 to protect unionized workplaces and workers from contract flipping. Investing in EI reform and empowering unions are not just about addressing the challenges of today. They're about building a stronger, fairer economy for everyone. Workers deserve to know that when times get tough, a safety net like EI will be there for them. And they deserve to know that if they want to join a union, barriers won't stand in their way. Canada's unions are ready to work with governments, employers, and communities to make this vision a reality. Together, we can ensure that no worker is left behind. Thank you. Larry?
Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle Larry Rousseau, vice-président exécutif du Congrès du travail du Canada. My name is Larry Rousseau, and I'm the executive vice president of the Canadian Labour Congress. I'm standing here with my colleagues to demand better from our elected officials. Workers from coast to coast are being crushed under the weight of skyrocketing costs for basics like rent, like groceries, and transportation. Trop de travailleurs et travailleuses croulent sous les pressions économiques et se retrouvent sans un seul sou pour avoir payé leur loyer, l'épicerie, l'Internet et leurs médicaments. They're doing everything right, but it's just not enough. This is the reality for too many Canadians. Pourtant, ils font tout ce qu'il faut. Mais ce n'est pas suffisant. C'est la triste réalité pour un trop grand nombre de Canadiens. Over the last 3 years, Canadians have faced an affordability crisis unlike anything that we have seen in this country. Inflation, interest rates, and rising unemployment have squeezed families to the breaking point. While Canadians struggle, corporations are thriving, and they are pocketing record profits. The crisis is not shared equally. It is working people who are paying the price, and this is not right. Quand le coût de la vie augmente sans hausse équivalente des salaires, le pouvoir d'achat des familles diminue, tandis que les profits des entreprises atteignent des sommets records. Il y a quelque chose qui ne va pas, c'est clair. Grocery prices are up 23%. Staples like baby food and chicken have risen even more. Big grocery chains claim that they're just passing on the cost, but their record profits tell an entirely different story. Le prix du panier d'épicerie augmente de 23% et certains produits comme le fromage, le beurre, les pâtes alimentaires et les œufs ont pour leur part augmenté de plus de 50%. This is not just inflation, everyone. It is exploitation. Families deserve accountability and relief from corporate greed. We're calling for bold action to put workers first and families first. We need a consumer protection agency to tackle rising grocery costs, a consumer protection agency that will expose price practices like shrinkflation and hold corporations accountable for profiteering. Les travailleurs et les travailleuses n'en demandent pas trop. Nous demandons simplement des actions concrètes et audacieuses pour faire passer les travailleurs et leurs familles en premier, comme l'imposition de la cupidité des entreprises par le biais de taxes sur les bénéfices exceptionnels et les excès de profit et la protection des locataires contre la flambée des loyers avec des lois plus strictes. Nous avons également besoin d'une agence de protection de consommateurs pour que la lutte soit faite contre la hausse des prix des produits alimentaires, pour dénoncer les pratiques telles que la contraction des prix et tenir les entreprises pour responsables de leurs profits. It is time for governments to choose. Will they side with working Canadians or will they side with corporate greed? Les solutions sont claires, mes amis. Ce qu'il nous faut maintenant, c'est l'action. Workers built this country and they deserve to share in the prosperity. Nous continuerons notre lutte pour rendre la vie plus abordable pour tous les Canadiens et toutes les Canadiennes et pour que personne ne soit laissé pour compte. Merci. I will now hand it over to my colleague, Siobhán Vipond. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. My name is Siobhán Vipond, Executive Vice President at the Canadian Labour Congress. Today I want to highlight a crisis that is affecting millions of Canadians, the healthcare crisis. Nearly 1 million Canadians are sacrificing basics like food and heat just to pay for medications. An additional million are borrowing money. This is absolutely unacceptable. The Pharmacare Act was a critical step towards universal single-payer pharmacare. It is the biggest healthcare milestone since Medicare, but we need to expand it to full coverage. Full universal pharmacare will keep people healthy, reduce hospitalization, and save money. It'll allow workers and employers to invest in better wages and retirement savings. We can't rely on private insurance that is controlled by your employer. We need a universal public healthcare system that puts people first. The federal government must act to make dental care publicly funded and eliminate for-profit companies profiting from essential services. Health workforce planning is absolutely urgent. Better data, funding for training, and incentives for healthcare workers in rural areas are needed. Invest in public colleges to expand training opportunities. A national nursing retention strategy is necessary. Better retention, recruitment, and staffing, including safe staffing and integration of internationally educated nurses. Long-term care must be fully funded. It must be fully public, and for-profit long-term care homes have to be prioritized over for-profit long-term care For-profit long-term care homes prioritize profits over care. So long-term care must become fully public, leading to, when it's for-profit, it's lower quality and it has worse outcomes. So we need to end for-profit ownership in long-term care. Privatization and outsourcing of healthcare must be stopped. The federal government must strengthen the public system to serve all Canadians fairly and equitably. Our health should not be about our ability to pay. We call on the federal government to strengthen our public healthcare system for the good of all. Thank you, and I'll pass it back to Bea for questions.
So as we look ahead to the federal election, one thing is very clear to us. Working people in Canada cannot afford a Pierre Poilievre government. Workers deserve fair wages. They deserve affordable essentials, secure jobs, and a safe home. But Poilievre's record speaks for itself. He's consistently attacked worker rights, championed anti-worker and anti-union bills, and undermined the very foundation of union advocacy. He's made it harder for workers to organize under Bill C-525 and gave employers the power to silence workers. Anti-worker policies weaken bargaining power and social supports. Conservatives have fought against measures that would make life more affordable, and Pierre Poilievre's actions have made it clear that he is not an ally to workers. We need leaders who will support workers, who will tackle corporate greed and lower prices on the things that we need. Canada's unions have a plan for a more just and equitable future, and we need action from every single level of government. Together, we can ensure that workers have the protections and opportunities that they deserve and that they can live their lives with dignity. So let's make sure that we stand up and demand better for all workers across Canada. And we're happy to take questions. Yes.
Ian Bailey, Globe and Mail. There's been some turmoil today over Donald Trump's policy on tariffs. What do you think is the stake of workers in this situation? What are your concerns about them?
We are extremely concerned about the impact that this will have on workplaces and on workers if the tariffs in fact do come to be, rather than just it being saber rattling. So we're going to be speaking with all of our union affiliates to find out how we can best fight back against this particular action and how we can safeguard those jobs. There's a lot on the line here.
What do you think you can do? What options do you have in the labor movement?
This is a very fresh conversation that's just happening, and so we will be circling around to all of our affiliates to understand what's at stake, which sectors at most are at stake, and how we can best come up with a strategy to work with government and to work with parties to fight back against these tariffs.
What will you tell Prime Minister Trudeau about tariffs when you meet him today?
That is a very important issue that we need to address very quickly, that we need to find solutions to, and that workers' lives are at stake.
Je ne sais pas si c'est vous, Mme Burke, ou ce sera M. Rousseau en français.
Oui.
Mes questions sont semblables à celles de mes collègues, c'est-à-dire, avec les tarifs de 25 %, quelles sont les inquiétudes du monde syndical en ce moment?
Les inquiétudes sont grandes. Nous savons que les tarifs peuvent avoir des conséquences qui sont inattendues. Alors, nous allons parler et consulter tous nos affiliés qui sont directement impliqués, parce qu'il faut attendre pour voir c'est quoi le tarif. Alors, une fois qu'on va voir qu'est-ce qui est sur la table, nous aurons les conversations, et ça inclut les conversations que nous aurons avec le premier ministre une fois qu'on sait qu'est-ce qui se passe.
Votre point de presse ce matin, c'est notamment sur l'inflation.
Oui.
L'effet des tarifs sur l'inflation, vous pensez quoi?
Écoutez, là, vous savez, on l'a dit, on l'a entendu à maintes reprises dernièrement dans une campagne électorale que ça va augmenter les prix. Alors, écoutez, les Canadiens et les Canadiennes en ont assez de l'inflation, des hausses de prix. Alors nous allons nous tenir farouchement contre toute condition qui va hausser les prix pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes.
Donc, j'en conclus que vous dénoncez les tarifs de 25 qui seraient imposés par M. Trump.
Tout à fait, oui.
Donc, maintenant que c'est sur la table,
Oui.
quel rôle le Conseil du travail peut-il jouer à ce moment-ci dans la grande équipe Canada? Vous comptez faire quoi ici et aux États-Unis?
Le Congrès du travail va s'occuper de consulter non seulement nos affiliés, mais de mobiliser les gens. Nous mobilisons les gens sur les grands enjeux qui nous touchent aujourd'hui. Et ça va inclure, comme je viens de dire, tout ce qui va toucher la hausse des prix. Alors, nous avons 3 millions de membres. Vous savez, il y a beaucoup, et plus, il y a nos retraités, 500 000. Alors, si on inclut les gens qui ne sont pas affiliés, il y a plusieurs millions de syndiqués au Canada. Mais nous sommes là pour tous les travailleurs, toutes les travailleuses, et nous allons mobiliser pour nous assurer que le gouvernement et toutes les instances sont très, très au courant des revendications.
This government has dealt with the Trump administration before, and last time they kind of fought fire with fire, right? Like they created tariffs on U.S. imports into Canada. Do you think that would be a good approach if these 25% tariff comes to pass?
I think we have to look at all approaches, so that might be a starting approach, but I don't know that that's going to be a good long-term strategy, right? We need to find a better solution to these kinds of totally unreasonable tariffs that are going to really impact our economy.
I mean, the last time around it kind of seemed to work, right? Like the U.S. stepped down.
Do we keep ramping it up, though? I don't know. You know what I mean? So it's hard to say. And is this just saber rattling at this moment in time, or will this really come to pass? There's so many questions before we get to January 20th.
Okay, thank you.
I'm really trying to understand what's going to be done from the CLC. I mean, we could see that the tariffs were coming. On pouvait voir, and if you don't mind, sorry, for my French listeners, I'd like to ask a question in French.
Yeah.
Mais on savait que les tarifs s'en venaient.
Oui.
Et on a l'impression que vous êtes pris au dépourvu parce que vous n'êtes pas capable de nous dire quel va être votre rôle.
Écoutez, comment est-ce qu'on peut réagir? Vous savez, quand on passe en négociation, on peut dire toutes sortes de choses. On attend pour avoir sur la table, pour voir noir sur blanc qu'est-ce qui est écrit. Alors, spéculer avant cela, qu'est-ce que ça donne? Nous n'allons pas déstabiliser nos travailleurs et nos travailleuses, ni la population canadienne, avec la spéculation. Nous attendrons pour voir qu'est-ce qui est sur la table, qu'est-ce que l'administration américaine veut faire, comment est-ce que le gouvernement canadien veut réagir, et une fois qu'on aura noir sur blanc ce qui est devant nous, c'est ça que les syndicats font. On agit rarement, concrètement, avant de voir qu'est-ce qui est sur la table.
Pouvez-vous faire pression aux États-Unis aussi avec vos amis des États-Unis?
Écoute, nous savons que solidairement, nous travaillerons avec nos confrères et nos consoeurs américains si c'est au bénéfice des travailleurs et travailleuses. Merci.
If I may, you're both suggesting that this should be taken very seriously, but also saying you don't want to speculate on what isn't a done deal yet. So, are you saying there's a chance that Donald Trump is bluffing? Like, what's your thoughts here?
Can any one of us really know what's going on in the man's mind? Because really putting strategy out through Twitter or whatever you want to call it now, right? Is that really a real strategy? Who knows? Hopefully he's bluffing. We are taking this very seriously. I know our union affiliates are taking this seriously. Workers are worried about what that's going to mean to them. So we will be gathering to come up with a strategy, and we will be working with government and the interested parties on trying to finalize what that looks like. But this was announced last night, so it's still very fresh. We've been prepping for today, quite frankly, since last night, so we will be having all of those meetings in the days and weeks to come, for sure.
And have you been in touch with your U.S. counterparts yet, or do you plan on doing that?
So we have a lot of large international unions that we also work with here on the Canadian side who are going to be impacted on both sides of the border, right, when tariffs come to pass, if that in fact happens. And so we will be working through all of those international bodies as well, along with our American counterparts, yes.
Prime Minister has talked about a First Ministers meeting to talk about this matter, a meeting this week. Presumably, obviously, you won't be at the table, but what do you hope to, shall we say, inject into that discussion of Canada's First
Keep workers front and center in your deliberations and how it's going to impact workplaces. Workers are having a hard enough time making ends meet. They're having a hard enough time having good paying middle-class jobs with benefits and a pathway to retirement, and anything that threatens that is a threat to all of us.
Thank you. This concludes the press conference. Merci. C'est ce qui conclut la conférence.